property, the silence that followed was absolute. My mother froze mid-step while Stephanie slowly turned back toward me, her expression caught between disbelief and dawning horror. "Excuse me," my mother finally managed. Jackson chose that perfect moment to approach, extending his hand to me with practiced deference. "Miss Thompson, everything is prepared for your father's celebration. The chef has included all your requested items, and the 1962 Bordeaux you selected from your personal collection is exceptional, with the prime rib." My mother's face had drained of colour. "Your personal collection." I smiled, finally stepping around my stunned sister. "Yes, Mom, from my wine cellar here at the Athena. I've been meaning to tell you both I own this hotel and the Meridian downtown, and 4 others across the Midwest." Stephanie's mouth opened and closed, without sound. My mother grabbed the nearest chair for support. That's not possible," she finally whispered. "And yet here we are," I gestured toward the restaurant. "Shall we join Dad and the others?" "I believe we have a celebration to continue," as we walked toward the private dining room. The hotel staff we passed all greeted me by name, with the respect reserved for not just any owner, but one they genuinely admired. The whispered "Good evening, Miss Thompson, and lovely to see you." Miss Thompson created a symphony of recognition that made denial impossible just before entering the Winston suite. Stephanie grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. "Why didn't you tell us?" she hissed. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. I looked at her hand until she released me, then straightened my sleeve before meeting her eyes. "You never asked," I said simply. "None of you ever asked." Then I pushed open the doors to greet my surprised father, whose expression shifted from confusion to astonishment as the staff welcomed me not as a guest, but as their boss. The evening had only just begun. The remainder of my father's birthday dinner unfolded like a surreal play, where half the cast had received an entirely different script. My father, initially shocked into silence by the staff's deference toward me, recovered more quickly than my mother or sister, his surprise gradually transforming into something resembling pride as the evening progressed. "So this is why you've been so secretive about your work," he said during a quiet moment when we found ourselves alone near the dessert table. "You own this entire place." "The whole hotel, this one and several others," I confirmed, watching his eyes widen further. "Why keep it from us?" There was genuine confusion in his voice, without the defensive edge my mother and sister had displayed. I considered my answer carefully. At first, it was because I wasn't sure I'd succeed. Then, when I did, it became clear that you all had a fixed idea of who I was and what I was capable of. After a while, it seemed easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe." He nodded slowly, looking troubled. "I suppose we haven't given you much reason to share your successes. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of their dismissive treatment I'd ever received from any family member before I could respond." My mother approached her social mask firmly back in place. "After her initial shock, Abigail, the clerks are asking about the historical photographs in the hallway. Since you apparently know everything about this place, perhaps you could enlighten them." Her tone was brittle, her smile fixed, as I excused myself to speak with the guests. I overheard my father asking her, "Did you have any idea about this?" "Of course not," she replied tersely. "She's deliberately kept us in the dark to create this spectacle." The remainder of the evening continued in this vein, my mother maintaining a rigid pleasantness, while shooting me looks that fluctuated between disbelief and betrayal. Stephanie oscillating between awkward attempts to align herself with my newfound status and sullen withdrawal. My father growing increasingly fascinated with each revelation about my business empire. By the time the dessert, a custom-created bourbon caramel cake for my father, was served, the party had effectively split into two factions: those who found my success intriguing and those who found it threatening the Robertsons. And clerks peppered me with questions about the hotel business, while my mother and Stephanie sat in strange silence, Derek looking uncomfortably between them. When the celebration finally concluded around midnight, I instructed Jackson to ensure all guests received luxury gift baskets and transportation home. My father embraced me warmly, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Abby." Before being ushered away by my tight-lipped mother, Stephanie lingered, clearly struggling with what to say. "Finally," she managed. "So all those times we thought you couldn't afford to join vacations or contribute to family gifts." I was building this, I finished for her, gesturing to the elegant surroundings. And I did send gifts, substantial ones, the vacation to Hawaii for Mum and Dad's anniversary last year. The Christmas checks all from me. Mum said those were from a distant cousin who'd had a windfall. Stephanie said, looking genuinely confused. I laughed without humour. Of course she did. Heaven forbid I be successful in a way she didn't orchestrate or approve. Derek approached, placing a hand on Stephanie's shoulder. "We should go, the car is waiting to me," he added with apparent sincerity. "Incredible place you've built here, truly impressive." Stephanie shot him a look I couldn't quite interpret before turning back to me. "We should talk soon." After they departed, I returned to my office, kicked off my heels, and poured myself a generous glass of the same Bordeaux weed. Served with dinner, Michael knocked lightly before entering, settling into the chair across from me. "That was quite an evening," he said, loosening his tie. "How are you feeling?" I considered the question, swirling the wine in my glass. Relieved, vindicated, exhausted. Sad, I took a sip. "All of the above. Your father seemed to come around." "He did." I acknowledged he's always been more reasonable than Mom or Stephanie, just not reasonable enough to ever stand up for me. Michael nodded understanding. "And now, what happens tomorrow when the shock wears off?" That was the critical question. The revelation of my success had been dramatic and satisfying in the moment. But I knew enough about family dynamics to recognize this was just the beginning of a complicated renegotiation of relationships and expectations. "I suspect my phone will start ringing very early tomorrow." I said my mother will either demand explanations or attempt to rewrite history to claim she always believed in me. Stephanie will likely vacillate between resentment and attempts to capitalize on her connection to me, and you'll respond how I set down my glass. Suddenly certain of my next steps, I'm going to set boundaries. Clear, firm boundaries for the first time in my life. This isn't about revenge or gloating. It's about establishing the respect I should have had all along. Over the next 2 hours, Michael and I outlined a strategy that wasn't about punishing my family, but about protecting myself and creating the possibility of healthier relationships moving forward. I decided to consult with Dr. Eleanor Hayes, the therapist. I'd been seeing occasionally since purchasing my first hotel to ensure my approach was constructive rather than reactive. As predicted, my phone began ringing at 7:03. The next morning, I let it go to voicemail. A text from Stephanie followed immediately. "We need to talk. Can I come by your hotel today?" I responded to neither immediately, instead calling Dr. Hayes to schedule an emergency session that afternoon by the time I arrived at her office overlooking Luring Park. I had 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and an email from my father that simply read, "I owe you an apology." Many apologies when you're ready to talk. I'm ready to listen. That email, so different from my mother's demanding voicemails, and Stephanie's alternately accusatory and ingratiating texts, gave me hope that at least one relationship might be salvageable. "The question isn't whether you should forgive them," Dr. Hayes said after I recounted the previous evening's events. "The question is what kind of relationship you want moving forward and what boundaries need to be in place to make that relationship healthy for you." By the end of our session, I had clarity about my next steps. This wasn't about punishment or revenge. It wasn't even about forcing acknowledgement of past slights. It was about creating a new dynamic where my autonomy and achievements were respected, and where old patterns of dismissal and diminishment could not continue. I returned to the Athena that evening and instructed the front desk to send up any family members who might arrive unannounced. Then I sat in my penthouse living room overlooking the city I'd conquered on my own terms, and finally returned my father's email with a simple message. "I'm ready to talk alone tomorrow at 2 p.m. in my office at the Athena." It was time to reshape my family relationships as deliberately as I'd built my business empire, with clear vision, firm boundaries, and the unshakable confidence that came from knowing exactly what I was worth. My father arrived for our meeting precisely 10 minutes early, a habit ingrained from decades of client appointments. At his accounting firm, Jackson escorted him to my office, where I'd arranged for coffee and my father's favourite cookies from a local bakery. "This is quite a view," he said, gazing out at the Minneapolis skyline from my floor-to-ceiling windows. He seemed smaller, somehow less intimidating than the larger-than-L life figure of my childhood. "It's why I chose this office," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. I wanted to be reminded daily of what I was building. An awkward silence fell between us, 32 years of miscommunication and missed connections hanging in the air. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "I don't know where to begin, Abigail. I'm still trying to process everything. The hotels, your success." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The fact that you felt you couldn't share any of it with us. I tried Dad in the beginning. I kept my voice even, determined to remain factual rather than emotional. When I got my first management position, when I started my consulting firm, when I acquired this hotel, I called home each time. The responses were always the same. Dismissive at best, undermining. At worst, he looked genuinely surprised. I don't remember when I called about my promotion to hotel manager. Mum said, 'At least it's steady work,' and immediately changed the subject to Stephanie's new apartment. When I mentioned starting my consulting business, you asked if I had a backup plan when it fails. After a while, it seemed pointless to share my milestones. My father's face flushed with recognition and shame. I remember now, I didn't realize I thought we were being practical, encouraging you to be realistic. You were practical and realistic with me. You were ambitious and encouraging with Stephanie. I kept my tone matter of fact, not accusatory. Different standards, different expectations, different support. He didn't deny it, which surprised me. Instead, he nodded slowly. Your mother and we understood Stephanie's path, the corporate ladder, the networking, the traditional markers of success. Your interests seemed so he struggled for the word unconventional. I suggested, yes, we worried. Perhaps we protected our own comfort by doubting yours. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for what felt like the first time in years. I was wrong, we were wrong. What you've built here is extraordinary, Abigail. The acknowledgement, so simple, so overdue, hit me with unexpected force. I blinked back sudden tears. Thank you for saying that your mother is struggling with all this, he continued. She feels deceived, I think. And Stephanie is, he trailed off, evidently unsure how to characterize my sister's reaction. I imagine they both feel threatened by the disruption to the family hierarchy, I said, but that's not actually my problem to solve. My father nodded slowly. What happens now? I outlined the boundaries I'd established with Dr. Hayes' guidance. I would maintain relationships with my family members individually rather than as a unit. I would not attend gatherings where my achievements or lifestyle would be minimized or mocked. I would be honest about my success moving forward, but would not tolerate attempts to leverage my resources without respect for my autonomy. That seems reasonable, my father said when I finished. More than reasonable given everything. I've also scheduled meetings with my attorney tomorrow to remove the anonymity from several gifts I've given the family over the years. The Hawaiian vacation, the Christmas checks, the contributions to your retirement fund. His eyes widened at this last revelation, the extra investment returns from the past 3 years. That was you. Yes, I've been supplementing your retirement account since I sold my second hotel. I wanted you and Mom to be comfortable, but I knew she wouldn't accept direct help from me. My father looked stunned, then deeply ashamed. All this time we've been treating you like the family underachiever, and you've been quietly supporting us. I didn't do it for gratitude or recognition. I clarified I did it because I could and because despite everything, you're my family. But moving forward, I want transparency, no more. Anonymous gifts, no more pretending to be less successful than I am. He agreed, and our conversation shifted to his birthday celebration. He genuinely enjoyed it. Once the initial shock wore off, he admitted, particularly seeing the respect my staff clearly had for me. Your mother kept saying you must have tricked us somehow that it couldn't possibly be your hotel. He shook his head. I told her she needed to accept the reality in front of her. That didn't go over well after he left, promising to process everything we discussed. I spent the afternoon in back-to-back meetings with my attorney, financial advisor, and therapist, solidifying my plan for restructuring family relationships. Sarah Jenkins, my attorney, helped me draft formal letters documenting past financial gifts and establishing clear parameters for any future family financial interactions. My financial advisor, Marcus Williams, reviewed my portfolio to ensure my family-related financial decisions wouldn't impact my business operations. Dr. Hayes helped me prepare psychologically for the conversations ahead, particularly with my mother, who would likely be the most resistant to the new dynamic. By the end of the day, Operation Family Reset, as Michael jokingly called it, was fully developed. I felt prepared, centered, and for the first time when dealing with family matters fully in control of my own narrative, I instructed Jackson to inform the front desk that my mother and sister were to be admitted if they arrived, but not given any information about my whereabouts or schedule. Sure enough, my mother appeared unannounced the following morning, clearly expecting to be immediately ushered into my presence. Mrs. Thompson Jackson greeted her with perfect professional courtesy. "Do you have an appointment with Miss Thompson today?" Her indignation was visible even on the security monitor I was watching from my office. "I don't need an appointment. I'm her mother, I understand. But Miss Thompson is currently in meetings. I'd be happy to check her availability later today or schedule something for tomorrow." The boundary, so simple, so standard for anyone else, was clearly shocking to her. After several minutes of increasingly agitated protest, she finally left, but not before informing Jackson that she would deal with Abigail directly about this ridiculous situation she called immediately upon leaving the hotel. This time I answered, "Hello, Mom. What on earth is going on, Abigail? I just came to see you at this hotel of yours, and I was treated like some sort of stranger. You were treated like any other visitor without an appointment," I corrected gently. "I run a business, Mom. I have meetings, responsibilities, schedules. I'm your mother. I shouldn't need an appointment to see my own daughter. Would you drop by Stephanie's law firm and expect to be immediately shown to her office?" The silence on the other end told me the point had registered. This is different. She finally said, but with less conviction, "It's really not my business. My career, my professional standing, they all deserve the same respect. You've always given Stephanie's another pause. We need to discuss what happened at your father's birthday as a family. I'm happy to talk with you, Mum, but not until you're ready to acknowledge some uncomfortable truths about how you've treated me and my career choices. Over the years, this isn't about. It's exactly about that." I interrupted firmly. "I'm not angry and I'm not trying to punish anyone. But I am establishing boundaries that should have been in place long ago." By the end of our conversation, we'd agreed to meet the following week with Dr. Hayes, present as a mediator. It wasn't an ideal solution from my mother's perspective, but she'd recognized I was no longer the daughter who could be dismissed or manipulated. Stephanie proved more adaptable, if not more sincere. She arrived at the Athena that afternoon, Derek in tow, requesting a tour of my sister's amazing hotel. The pivot from condescension to sudden sisterly pride was transparent, but I decided to accept it as a starting point as I showed them around. Stephanie peppered me with questions about the business, the clientele, the profit margins, clearly calculating the full extent of my success. Derek seemed genuinely impressed, asking thoughtful questions about the hospitality industry and my management philosophy. "You know," Stephanie said as we concluded the tour in the rooftop garden I had installed the previous spring, "we should talk about potential collaborations. The firm is always looking for impressive venues for client events, and family discount rates would be a win-win." And there it was, the true purpose of her visit. Not reconciliation, not genuine interest in my life, but determining how my success could benefit her. "I don't offer family discount rates." I said pleasantly but firmly, "The Athena maintains consistent pricing for all clients, but your firm is welcome to book through our corporate events department like any other business." Her smile faltered slightly, "But surely for your own sister I value our relationship too much to complicate it with business entanglements." I interrupted smoothly. "I found that clear boundaries between family and business are essential for both to thrive." Derek nodded appreciatively, at this earning a sharp look from Stephanie. The rest of their visit passed uneventfully, and by the time they left, Stephanie had received the same message I delivered to our parents. I was open to a relationship, but only one based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. That evening, I had dinner with Michael in my penthouse, recounting the day's interactions. Phase 1 complete, he said, raising his glass in a toast. How does it feel? I considered the question carefully, like I'm finally the author of my own story, instead of a secondary character in someone else's. The challenging family meeting with my mother still lay ahead, but for the first time I felt fully prepared for whatever came next. This wasn't about revenge or retaliation for years of dismissal. It was about reclaiming my narrative and establishing the respect that should have been there all along. Sometimes I reflected the most powerful response to being underestimated isn't proving others wrong. It's living your truth so completely that their opinion becomes irrelevant. The family meeting I'd arranged with my mother took place in a neutral setting, a private conference room at Dr. Hayes' office building, rather than my hotel or my parents' home. This location choice was deliberate, removing the power dynamics associated with either territory and signaling that this was a facilitated discussion, not a casual family chat. My mother arrived 15 minutes early, dressed as though for a business negotiation, in a tailored navy suit, her posture rigid with defensive energy. My father arrived 5 minutes later, nodding to me with cautious optimism. Dr. Hayes welcomed us all with professional warmth, establishing ground rules for our conversation: no interrupting, no personal attacks, and a focus on I statements rather than accusatory you statements. We're here to establish healthier communication patterns. Dr. Hayes explained, not to assign blame or revisit every past grievance. My mother's skeptical expression made it clear she viewed this whole approach as unnecessary psychobabble, but she nodded agreement. Nonetheless, I began, as we'd planned, speaking calmly about my experience growing up as the less favored child, the consistent dismissal of my career choices, and the pattern of minimizing my achievements while celebrating Stephanie's. I provided specific examples without emotionality, simply laying out the facts as I had experienced them while I was working 3 jobs to put myself through college. You paid Stephanie's full tuition and housing at Cornell. I said when I landed my first management position, you changed the subject to Stephanie's new apartment, when I called to share that I'd started my own consulting firm. Dad asked if I had a backup plan for when it failed. My mother's face flushed as I continued, her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap. When I finished my opening statement, Dr. Hayes turned to her. Diana, would you like to respond to what Abigail has shared? My mother straightened her voice tightly. Controlled, I think there have been some misinterpretations of our intentions. We've always wanted what's best for both our daughters. Perhaps we expressed more concern about Abigail's choices because they seemed riskier, less conventional. The concern wasn't the issue. I clarified it was the assumption of failure, the lack of support, the constant comparison to Stephanie's more appropriate path that supported you. My mother's composure cracked slightly. We gave you a good home, a good education through high school. My father interjected quietly. We did make Abigail pay her own way through college while covering everything for Stephanie. My mother turned to him, betrayal evident in her expression. That was different. Stephanie was at an Ivy League school. The expenses were much higher. All the more reason I might have needed help. I pointed out the conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour. My mother alternately defensive and dismissive. My father increasingly reflective and acknowledging, and me remaining steady in my perspective. While open to theirs, Dr. Hayes guided the discussion skillfully, preventing derailments and keeping us focused on the path forward rather than just rehashing the past. The breaking point came when my mother finally voiced